This is the fourth program in the series Introduction to Counseling. It is about cognitive counseling theories. This program deals with certain theories of counseling. As you study these programs, you should develop your own personal theory of counseling. To do this, you should be familiar with the currently established points of view. With this background, you can then establish your own theory through practice and study. Counseling theories presented in this program are based on personality and behavior theories. This is only understandable since counseling deals with behavior. These theories attempt to explain what happens in the counseling relationship. What does counseling deal with? Correct. In each of the basic theories to be discussed, you will notice several differences. Each can be of value in forming your own counseling theory if you evaluate the facts and opinions behind it. For each theory covered, there will be an identification, a discussion of the major concepts it contains, and a review of how it relates to the counselor and the counseling process. The first theory is the trait factor point of view. This was originally used only as a vocational counseling approach, but since has undergone many changes. Basically, this theory states that one should use self-understanding, a knowledge of one's personality and abilities to develop one's full potential. To understand the trait factor theory, we must realize that personality is a group of interdependent traits, such as abilities, interests, attitudes, and temperaments. As the person develops from infancy to maturity, so do these traits. How would you describe personality? Right. The trait factor theory attempts to establish the idea that if a person has certain personality traits, then he will be successful in certain vocations. For example, it would imply that a person who shows an interest in other people and is highly verbal should be a good social worker. This is not to say he could do nothing else, but the trait factor theory offers such a conclusion as one possibility. Trait factor counseling assumes that persons will use self-understanding and knowledge of their abilities to develop themselves as fully as possible. What does trait factor counseling want one to use to determine vocations? Right. On the other hand, by using trait factor counseling, the counselee can come to recognize certain traits that are harmful to his total development. By realizing these traits exist, the theory suggests, one can correct them and thus solve certain problems. One can use self-knowledge to achieve satisfying work and a happy home life. This trait factor viewpoint holds that persons seek counseling because they cannot determine for themselves the best course to follow. They need the information that the counselor can provide to fully understand themselves. The counselor, using this theory, actively intervenes to influence the development of the client. According to the trait factor viewpoint, why do persons seek counseling? Yes. The counselor using trait factor theory will generally follow 6 steps in his counseling process. They are analysis, synthesis, diagnosis, prognosis, counseling, and follow-up. Analysis refers to collecting information about the counselee in an effort to understand him better. Synthesis means using this information to point out counselee's strengths and liabilities. Diagnosis, as in the practice of medicine, is determining the characteristics of the person and the cause of the problem. Prognosis is a prediction for the counselee's future based on the diagnosis, assuming a certain course of action is followed. Counseling is the period of time spent examining and readjusting the possible goals. Follow-up is the evaluation of the results of the counseling and the need for continued help with the specified problems. What does analysis refer to? Yes. In the trait factor counseling process, the counselor should establish an open relationship, lead the counselee to self-understanding, help the counselee plan a course of action, help carry out the plan of action, and in some cases, refer the counselee to other personnel workers. In this process, counseling is time spent in what way? Correct. Some of the criticisms of this trait factor method are that it deals too much with objective and that the counselee's personal desires are not given full consideration. and that the counselee develops too great a dependency on the counselor for direction. The counselor is supposed to ensure that the counselee realizes his full potential without using excessive persuasion. Which of these is seen as a disadvantage of the trait factor method? Correct. Another counseling theory is the eclectic viewpoint. Eclectic means choosing or selecting any appropriate method from any suitable source. The counselor using this eclectic method believes that a single technique is too limiting, and several techniques, concepts, or procedures should be used if they meet the needs of the counselee. Eclectic means choosing methods from... Yes. When employing the eclectic theory, the counselor is trying to select a method for each individual counselee or problem, instead of asserting one solution will work with every type individual. In using the eclectic theory, it is necessary to take into consideration the past, the present, and the potential future of the counselee. This theory maintains it is the counselor's job to help the counselee use the widest selection of available resources to develop problem-solving behavior. Problems are present now, the eclectic theory states, because the counselee failed to use his intellectual resources in an earlier stage. What time periods does the eclectic theory concern itself with? Right. The theory holds that if a person seeks counseling because there are problems which cannot be dealt with alone, then counseling is to replace emotional compulsive behavior with deliberate rational behavior, based on maximum use of intellectual resources. The counselor guides the counselee so that emotional behavior is replaced with what type of behavior? The counselor assists the counselee in learning to adapt to the situation and function more effectively. This involves assisting in personality adjustment, suggesting a plan for change of behavior, arranging conditions for efficient learning, helping the counselee to develop internal resources which will solve the perceived problems. To use eclectic counseling effectively, the counselor must be sensitive to any changes which occur during the counseling sessions. The eclectic counseling theory provides for a general plan, but the plan should be unusually flexible. Once the sessions are completed, the counselee who has been successfully counseled will have better control over his behavior, will perceive his environment more realistically, will be more logical in thought, and more mature in actions. What kind of plan is used with the eclectic theory? Correct. Critics of the eclectic method point out that it is difficult to master even one counseling technique, and even more difficult to master various techniques that are necessary in eclectic counseling. It is also considered difficult for the counselor to select the most appropriate counseling method upon first meeting the counselee. Next, we can consider counseling by counter-conditioning. This theory is a result of the behavioral school of psychology. Its concept is relatively simple, that all behavior is learned, and that it is possible to unlearn maladaptive behavior and replace it with more useful and healthy responses. A counselor using this theory asks many questions during the initial interview. The purpose of the questions is to understand the background of the counselee's problem. Each answer is accepted without question or criticism. What type of counseling approach will a counselor use? Right. After the counselor and counselee have agreed on the nature of the problem, several techniques may be used. One is to replace fearful behavior with assertive behavior. A counselee who is afraid to express an opinion for fear of disagreement, for example, will be encouraged to express assertive behavior whenever appropriate. One of the best-known counseling procedures of this type was developed by Joseph Wolpe. Wolpe's procedure is based on the principle of reciprocal inhibition. This theory states that persons have come to associate certain situations with anxiety until it is impossible for them to respond in any other way. The theory of reciprocal inhibition states that the person must learn a new response which inhibits anxiety and learn to use the new response in the anxiety-provoking situation. The technique itself is called systematic desensitization, and it may be used to solve a problem as common as the fear of dogs. What response is this technique trying to eliminate? There are 3 steps in the systematic desensitization technique. First, the counselee is taught a response which is antagonistic to the development of anxiety. The response most commonly used is deep muscle relaxation. A person is seldom anxious and relaxed at the same time. Next, the counselee constructs an anxiety hierarchy. This lists the situations which cause anxiety in the order of their importance. In the case of fear of dogs, for example, the counselee may feel some anxiety upon hearing a dog bark and a great deal of anxiety when touching one. What do you think will be used to control this anxiety? The counselee then learns to practice deep muscle relaxation while experiencing the anxiety-producing situation. The item that causes least anxiety is considered first in all its aspects. If relaxation is maintained, the next item is taken up and considered. Over a period of time, each item is considered while relaxation is maintained as long as possible. Yet another behavioral approach to counseling also begins by learning about those experiences which affect the counselee's behavior. But in this case, reinforcers are used to help the counselee learn new habits of behavior. Which technique uses an anxiety hierarchy? Positive reinforcers, often called rewards, can include praise, commendation, displays of regard, and good grades or job advancement. Negative reinforcement is a bit more difficult to understand and involves the withdrawal of a response. Psychologists point out that when responses are followed by no reinforcement, positive or negative, behavior eventually ceases. In general, the sooner reinforcement follows an act or response, the more effective it is. What could be considered a positive reinforcer? There are 4 methods often used in behavioral counseling. The first is operant learning, which means that the counselor's prompt timing in providing reinforcement will more effectively determine future client responses. Parents, administrators, and other interested persons, of course, also reinforce behavior outside the counseling sessions. The second method is imitative learning, and it is used as its name implies. The counselee observes models of more suitable behavior, and this behavior is then imitated and reinforced. These models can be audio or videotapes, films, or even written autobiographies. Which of these might be a suitable imitative learning model? Right. Another technique of behavioral counseling is cognitive learning, which includes verbal instruction and role-playing. And the fourth technique is emotional learning. In the emotional learning method, severe feelings of anxiety are relaxed in the same general way as with the systematic desensitization. Cognitive learning and emotional learning are techniques which are included in what method of counseling? Right. Criticisms of behavior counseling and reciprocal inhibition are similar. Some counselors feel it is a cold and impersonal relationship and concentrates too much on mechanical techniques. Another criticism is that client goals tend to be determined by counselor and not by counselee. This has been a brief overview of the cognitively oriented counseling theories: trait factor, eclectic, and behavioral counseling. In the next program, you will explore the affectively oriented counseling approaches.